starting to slow down for the attendees, so we're gonna get started. Thank you all for joining. My name is Dakota Hipburn. I'm on the partner marketing team here at JumpCloud. I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar, Unlocking Security Automation Best Practices for MSPs. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. Everyone looks like has been able to find the questions box. Feel free to put in any questions, comments that you have at any time during this webinar. We'll try to weave them in, but we definitely have a pretty packed agenda with a great conversation going on. But we did save time at the end for Q&A. So any questions you have at any time, like I said, put them in. And then at the end as well, if something came to mind, put it in there as well. We'll try to get to all questions we can. If there's any that we can't get to because time ran out, or if for some reason it's a very specific use case, either for like DNSFilter or for JumpCloud, we'll connect with you after offline. We'll definitely get the resources you need that we need as well to answer that question fully. There's also going to be a quick brief survey at the end. Let us know how we did, and any questions that either we didn't get to or you thought of last minute that time ran out on, and then also what we can do to improve. These webinars are for you, so we would love to know what you're looking for and how we can best meet your needs and keep your interest and definitely have some good conversations that you're looking forward to. So with that, today's speakers, we got a great group on here today. So we got Chris Tate, who's a principal strategist for MSP for JumpCloud, as well as Mikey Pruitt, who is an MSP evangelist for DNSFilter. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Mikey. Chris, do you want to get started and give some quick introductions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Dakota. As you can see, I'm got my webinar hat on, so I'm very much fully branded up JumpCloud at this moment in time. Principal strategist for MSP, as you can see, but my background is all MSP. I used to run an MSP in the UK. Then I ran an MSP sort of consultancy business and websites before joining the vendor side. So whilst today I'm talking as part of a vendor webinar, I like to think that I've kind of done a lot of the things that we're going to be speaking about in the MSP space. And we've also made quite a conscious decision to not bore you with a million PowerPoint slides. This is literally going to be a conversation between us, everyone on the call, to talk a little bit about automation. So if you do have any questions, I'd love to see them come in, and then Dakota's going to sort of fire them through to us either as we go or at the end. So let's keep it interactive. It's a pretty nice group. It's a very spread out group. I'm not the best at US geography, but it seems like everyone's kind of all over the shop. So yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to join us, and I'm looking forward to get going. But before we do that, let me just introduce Mikey, who could tell us a little bit about himself as well.
Sure, thanks, Chris. So I'm Mikey Pruitt. I'm the MSP evangelist here at DNSFilter. I've been at DNSFilter for about 4 years and served in a few roles here. Actually started in DevOps, which is solely focused on automation. I've been automating business processes for nearly a decade, built my first website in the early 2000s when CSS wasn't even a thing. So, and I'm really excited about this conversation just because of my appreciation for automation. And I'd like to thank the JumpCloud team for inviting us and doing this joint webinar with us. And I'm located in coastal South Carolina. We're about to experience a potential hurricane. So if I cut out or anything, just remember I was about to say something profound and amazing.
Yeah, please don't do that. I've not got enough material to do this on my own. So yeah, let's hope it doesn't come to that. So let's dive in, right, and talk a little about automation. And one of the reasons that I thought it would be useful to have this chat in the first place was I know that you, Mikey, and I were both at DatoCon a couple of weeks ago in Washington, DC. And I'm sure people on the call today were there as well. And the CEO of Kaseya stood up in the keynote and was talking about many different topics about what's happening with data within Kaseya and everything. But the bit that kind of struck out to me a little was when he was talking about the kind of skill shortage and technical wage inflation and all the things that are happening within the MSP community. And then I went back and I had a look at some surveys. You know that MSP vendors love to put these surveys out all the time. And I saw that Datto was saying that 22% of their partners say that hiring, staffing and retention is keeping them up at night. Kaseya was 19%, so very similar. And ConnectWise, they were saying that 30% of their partners were saying that it's kind of recruiting staff is preventing them from delivering the services that they want to necessarily. It's a case of recruiting because staff are getting too expensive. It's a case of retaining because sort of other people are coming along with deeper pockets, poaching staff. So it's kind of, basically, it just seems like a perfect storm where we've got not enough sort of trained technical people trying to fill these positions. So this is kind of where I think automation comes in terms of it. At its heart, and I don't know whether you agree with my sort of overall view of this, but at its heart, it kind of helps MSPs do more with less or with fewer technical resources by kind of automating some of these more manual processes. So, I mean, what does automation mean to you, Mikey, would you say, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think the DataCon talk really did tee up this conversation nicely, and your points are wholly valid with tech shortages, just not enough hands to triage everything that comes in. And automation to me just means taking the things that you have done like more than once. If you've done something more than once, there's an opportunity that it can be done by a computer for you, therefore freeing you up to think of bigger picture ideas, strategy type of things, and focusing more on your customers or anywhere else that maybe you want to take more vacations, whatever it happens to be. Automation can be freeing in that it will do the work while you're doing other things. It's simply that.
Yeah, I think we all kind of agree on that. I suppose that freeing up time to do more strategic things probably seems nice from an MSP owner or manager point of view. I guess the challenge is how does that sort of filter down to the engineers themselves? I mean, do they? And I don't know the answer to this. So I'm just interested in your opinion. I mean, would engineers see automation as a threat? I mean, or do they kind of see that it's potentially taking away their job? They may love logging onto servers and restarting print spoolers, but if we can automate that, is that ruining their job?
Yeah, I think automating yourself out of a job is really the end goal. I mean, and I promise you, once you have automated your job, there are more jobs to do. Like, don't be worried about automating yourself out of a job, but strive towards that, and that will get you to where you want to be. And additionally, automation not only saves time, but it creates a repeatable template, if you will, for a process that can no longer be messed up as easily by human hands. Like we always say in the security business that the user is the weakest link, and the same is true for all the business processes that we have. If I do something on my keyboard, maybe I fat finger something or whatever, but with automation, you can all get together and agree on a template and then just trigger that template to fire in whatever area of the business happens to be in. And that's just one of the other strengths that automation can bring to your business.
So reducing errors by putting the work in at the front end to create the automation and then pushing it out that way. Okay, yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. So obviously there's lots of different types of automation. There's lots of different ways that we can go with this. Looking at areas that DNSFilter and JumpCloud can help and not. I mean, so there's lots of automation that we don't get involved in. What are kind of top automation things that you would think that people would look for? I mean, one that I would jump up straight away is, okay, and this is something that JumpCloud can help with, but it's certainly not unique to us, is patch management, right? I mean, patch management is probably one of the most important things that an MSP should be doing. I'm hoping that they're all doing it, but it's very, very time consuming from a manual point of view. So I would suggest, and I don't have the figures, but I would suggest that a significant number of MSPs already automate patch management in one way or another. But if they're not, then maybe that's a pretty low-hanging fruit to go after to try and automate that. I'm curious to know, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or comments about finding a little info about is patch management they are automating or not automating, but I would suspect most are. So if we take that as kind of, well, I'm not saying a baseline of automation, but if that's something that most people should be doing, what else are you seeing as a tip, Mikey?
I think in the MSP space, automation really centers around your RMM and your MDM, and that's a big part of the conversation. But there's a lot more that you can do, specifically with DNS filter. Obviously, you can deploy our roaming agents via your RMM MDM tools. But the heart of DNS filter is the ability to mass update policies across your entire user base. So DNS is, the core system that is communicating between your devices and the internet. We're like an intermediary layer that can prevent bad stuff from happening during that conversation, during that connection. And what you can do is adjust the settings in a policy, like maybe a new domain came out that you don't want your employees accessing. You can apply that in one place and have that trickle down to every endpoint that you manage. So that's kind of how DNS filter plays in, kind of an automation, but more of a oversight across a mass deployment.
Yeah, and RMM is a great point, and it just reminded me of something when I was in my MSP, which is one of my favorite things to do, which I don't know why it gave me so much pleasure, but it does even thinking about it, is using the old RMM to install the new RMM agent, and then the new RMM to remove the old one, which is kind of
You're
cool.
like, goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why RMM vendors aren't kind of a little bit cuter when they see something, trying to install something to replace it. So they don't kind of block it or something, but they don't, quite rightly so. But it's quite an elegant process, I always think. So another thing that, we're talking RMM, but I guess there's also an element of PSA, right, in some experience that I've had, and I think that most MSPs will have had, is kind of automating or ticket automation. And there's a whole lot of work being done on this with, again, at Datto.com, we saw some new emerging vendors that are trying to put some AI into the ticket workflows. But even sort of basic ticket automation around acknowledging tickets or maybe sending help desk articles, that kind of thing. Are you seeing that as a powerful way of automating as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the first things that DNS filter automated was our ticketing system. Other than our actual deployments of our servers around the globe, but you know, we want to meet our SLAs and respond to customers quickly. And, an automated message can do that and they're easy to set up, but there needs to be more feedback based on like the keywords in the specific request. You can send relevant help desk articles, as you mentioned, Chris, and just kind of bolster that communication so it's not just a wasted, like, hey, we met our SLA, within whatever 1 hour or whatever. But here's some information while you wait for one of our technicians to look further into your issue and get back to you. That's a key thing that we've seen our MSPs really excel with when they implement those type of systems.
Yeah. I guess no one really wants an automation to trigger to say we've hit an SLA. It's just pretty lazy, right? But I do think that there's a whole bunch of work being done with AI and ticketing, and I think that this is something that either the existing PSAs are going to improve on, or there's going to be a whole bunch of new PSAs coming that really nail this automated ticketing experience, because there's a whole host of stuff that can be done there with AI and with knowledge bases and things. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that MSPs are going to be able to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, and there's other you could call them like shortcuts within the ticketing system where perhaps the message gets routed to the proper tech the first time, so that it's not being passed around between like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or whatever you happen to have, and just getting the message to the right person faster. Like that's a critical automation that can save you time and give your customers a lot more value to you being their MSP.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a double win, right? Double whammy. It's kind of it's saving you time, but the customer doesn't have to go through all of the same sort of level 1 steps when they've already reported the problem, or it's a common issue or something. So yeah, I agree. That's good. And so obviously we're talking. I guess at the minute we're just talking a little about ticketing and monitoring. There's an element of sort of self-healing that can come into this as well. I joked about it earlier with things like print spoolers. It's the classic example. If you're demonstrating an RMM, you kind of kill the print spooler process and get it to kind of restart automatically. Is self-healing something that is a key part of the automation stack, do you think?
Yeah, and I would say it's probably a little bit more elusive than we would like. Like it's, a challenge. But this like cybersecurity and running your MSP business, like all of this is a journey, and the goal is to be better today than you were yesterday. So if you can develop an alert that will let you know, like, oh, like DNS filter was uninstalled from this machine, that alert then triggers a reinstall. Like that's part of self-healing. And if you do that for DNS filter, you can do it for another app or a browser. Like maybe Mikey runs the Brave browser and his IT team doesn't like that and they want him to use Chrome. And you can force me to do that if you really want to. Please don't, Bree.
Yeah, but yeah, if it's anything like working at JumpCloud, they will know because you occasionally install a different browser or something to test something. Then we get IT straight on saying, what is this you're putting on the machine? You got to. That's not on our list, so let's look at it. But yeah, so you could automate that process, right? And there's a whole bunch of tools. We've spoken previously with other vendors in the space like ThreatLocker or something, for example, that can kind of lock that down to the nth degree. So I think that having that flexibility of sort of pushing the apps out and making sure that only those apps can run, or removing apps that aren't certified, or preventing them accessing the network is sort of critical. And it's a fantastic way of preventing malware getting into the networks. Well, it's a fantastic way of preventing malware from succeeding if it gets into the networks, unfortunately, in the first place. So, yeah, I mean, I think that sort of self-healing is obviously something that's very important. Another one for us is this is a JumpCloud thing of things like password resets or password issues, which is where the solution that we provide can help sort of deal with password resets, but obviously with single sign-on, that kind of takes away all of these multiple passwords that users have to remember for different applications. Something like, I saw a stat the other day that 40% of help desk tickets into an MSP have got some kind of relation to passwords. And I think that as an industry, and hopefully JumpCloud are playing their part, we're trying to sort of solve that by the multi-factor authentication, the password manager. We're kind of moving gradually the whole industry to a passwordless single sign-on experience. But I think that the more we can kind of nail down at taking some of the low-hanging fruit, such as password resets away from users and allowing them to automate that, or doing it in a much more self-service manner, is a great way of automating as well. So I think that's something that we're kind of working very heavily on to try and help MSPs. And I think, if you could save, as an MSP, if that 40% figure's anything like correct, if you could save a fraction of time on those tickets, that's a significant saving you can make.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like passwords is a big soapbox topic for me, and it's just a trade-off between convenience and security. So we all know, like everyone on this call probably already knows that, you need a password with X amount of entropy to be secure, and you need multi-factor authentication, single sign-on where available. But getting the end user to follow all of those rules is a challenge. I'll admit, and I don't think it can be solved with anything other than like user education and just supporting them as they're going on this journey to make their lives slightly more hectic by managing passwords and clicking the button on their phone when it pops up, that type of stuff. It is a challenge. I think JumpCloud's doing a great job with that.
Yeah, and I guess we're going slightly off topic, but do you think as an MSP community, and I'm classing us all within that community, could be doing a better job of this, right, in being a little more forceful with end users? Because as you say, it's always this balance between security and convenience. And if you're not careful, then convenience always wins, because the end user probably just wants to use. I mean, ultimately, they would want to use the same password for every application. They'd want it to be password one, and they definitely want no kind of extra factors of authentication. But is it a case of education? Do you think it'll be solved by education, or is that need to be mandated to say to the end users everything is multi-factor?
I mean, I think it's a must. Like you must do it, but education needs to be the soft landing for those users. Maybe that makes more sense.
Yeah,
Like you
absolutely.
beat them over the head with the club, and then you kind of lift their spirits with some training and take them to coffee or whatever you have to do.
Yeah, I was just reading an article from, I think it was some Enable research, where they're saying that something, I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 90%, or probably 100% of MSPs know that end users should be using multi-factor authentication, but only probably about 30% are actually sort of mandating that to their end users. And I guess that's because of this convenience thing. They probably want to make it as frictionless as possible for their end users, rather than to put these barriers in all the time, which ultimately reflects on the MSP, right? So the end user has to wait for a text or SMS message to come in, or pop up on the phone. They're blaming the MSP for this, right? When the education will probably allow them to say, this is why we're doing this, and hopefully that would sort of help the message get across.
Yeah, and in the reality, the like password management MFA is actually easier than managing all of those passwords yourself, because you really only have to have the one password to get to all of your other passwords. And like, I don't even know any of my passwords except for the one, and that's the only one I need to know.
Well, I'm just going to do the slight sales bit here. With the JumpCloud password manager, you don't even need to know one password. It's so there's no master password.
That's even better.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get someone to do a demo for you, Mike. You don't worry. The
Please.
sales will be in touch. Yeah. So as I was thinking about, with some notes what to speak about today, I started to think a little about, obviously we're talking about technical automations. Recently-ish at Mikey, one of the first integrations we did was on the billing side for PSA, because like most products in the MSP space, we're priced per user per month, and it's variable. So we can help generate that consumption data to flow into the PSA for the MSPs to invoice to their clients. So I'd say these are very much business automations, so that whilst they're not saving technical resources time necessarily, they're still saving valuable time within the MSP. So, I mean, are there kind of other business automations that MSPs should be considering?
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of things that you can automate. I actually got started with DNSFilter from collaborating with one of the co-founders about how he was automating the DNSFilter deployment stack. I was automating a freelance web design business I had, and I had things set up where I would have a conversation with someone, they wanted to move forward with a website or whatever. I would run a script on my computer, it would launch, it would deploy a website, then it would send off their first bill and then get paid, and then I would know to move forward. Like I would get an email that said so and so has paid. So like there's a lot of things you can do. Like, and I was a one-man shop. That's why I spent the time to work on these automations, so that I could be freed to spend time with my family or go to the beach, or build more automations. Like I maybe have a bit of an addiction, but there's a lot of things in your business that you can automate. And like I said earlier, if you notice you're doing something more than once, think of ways that you can automate it.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean, when I started this conversation or started thinking about it, I was very much thinking of technical stuff. So, but there are so many different things around sales automation that can be done, or workflow automation, different things within inside the business. So, and there are so many tools now, I guess, like Zapier, however you pronounce that, and whatever, that can sort of help with those automation triggers between different applications, and SaaS applications in particular.
Yeah, actually DNSFilter in the early days was built on Zapier. I'm not sure how it's pronounced either exactly, but we had things happening and Google spreadsheets, and things would trigger and fire other things, and we have slowly been working with more modern tools. But I mean, Zapier's great for certain things, but you may graduate off of that platform at any time. There's another piece of software called Roost. It's spelled REWST, which I hear great things about in the MSP space to automate a lot of these processes. And if you think about things like Roost and Zapier, they're really just connecting disparate systems together, so that maybe they don't have a direct integration of any sort, but they both can integrate with Roost, or they have an open API, and you can grab data from one, send it to the other, and basically have a machine working for you on your behalf when you're sleeping or whatever.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll check that out. I did make a note here about backups, and the reason I wanted to mention backups is when when I was in my MSP, we were very much in the days of backup exec from Symantec. So we had to have someone literally spend a day crawling through emails saying whether the backup has worked, and if the backup hadn't worked, then sort of doing some jobs to test that. And obviously automation really helped with that, because we can automate the reading and parsing of those emails to create tickets based on jobs, whether or not they'd worked. Vendors came along and I guess tried to solve that problem, people like Backup Radar and whatever, to try and automate that even further. But that's a great example of automation that we used. A conceptual thing I've got to ask now, because I'm curious as to how you've done this, or what you've come across in the past, Mikey, is if automating these tasks, and your website business is maybe an example of this, are you still recording that time or action within your PSA or some kind of solution to show that it's been done? Because one of the challenges, especially with these sort of pre-active self-healing things, is if it's completely automated and the end user isn't aware of the issue ever existing, how do you demonstrate that you've done anything at the back end? So, I mean, would you still advocate creating the ticket, adding notes, this is automatically, adding notes, maybe a time entry, and then closing the ticket, so that you can, when you're doing your QBR with the customer, they think, well, we've not seen you, you've not dialed in all month, we're not going to pay you. But you can say, well, hang on a minute, you've had a pretty smooth experience this quarter because we've done all of this stuff. I mean, is that still important to be able to demonstrate what you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the you're basically talking about logging. So logging can be built into the automations that you create. And then that log can be, maybe reformatted to be a little bit more attractive, and then delivered to the customer automatically once a month or once a week, however that's worked out, maybe perhaps with their monthly invoice or however you want to work it out. But that is a very important part. And you don't want to leave those logging messages in the systems that they were created in. You want to aggregate them together so that they're all in one place, or at least get the ones that you need together and ready to ship off to the customer, or at least some type of a single place that it lives where you can review.
Yeah, so you're thinking back to some of the early RMM vendors. I remember when I was in my MSP, they would be advocating that if an automation happens, it creates a ticket in, let's say, Autotest PSA. It creates the ticket, it puts all the entries in there to say what's been done, and it allocates the minimum ticket time, which is 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. Because people aren't paying for this necessarily, it's all you can eat. But then at least you can demonstrate that work has been carried out, even though it's automated. It still shows in the ticket report when it gets sent to the user or they log in to do it that way. Okay, well, I think we've covered quite a bit there. Sort of before we move on, I guess, I mean, we're already at the half-hour mark. So, I mean, have we had any sort of questions in so far, Dakota?
Yeah. So we've had a couple. I can answer the first one, which was, is this being recorded? So yes, this is being recorded. We'll send it to you after. It'll be about an hour. You'll get an email, like obviously saying thank you, but the recording will be linked in there as well. I know some people had to hop off, so I try to answer those before they left. But for anyone who's still on that is interested, yes, the recording will be sent to you as soon as it's ready. So while I get into some questions, please be sure to put any additional ones in there. We obviously have quite a bit of time for some Q&A. There are some specific questions in here that we'll obviously answer afterwards. Don't necessarily want to answer it live, just because it's into the weeds and not sure if it'll affect everybody, but we will get to those and someone will follow up with you on those. So we talked a little bit, this was kind of like a personal question on here. So we talked a little bit about best practices for automation. Is there sort of like a horror story from you guys of something where, you tried to automate something and you messed up, right? And then, obviously you learned some best practices from it, but I think that might be a good conversation starter, right? If there's anything where, you try to get into automation and thought, wow, this did not work at all.
No, I mean, I personally not, but I guess it's the same with everything, right? You make sure that everything's backed up before you try, and you test these things. And I guess we'll come on, one of the things that maybe we ought to mention is around the tools and things people use to do this, because with the automation, I suppose to counter to what we spoke about at the very start, of creating a reliable, repeatable process. You don't want to create an unreliable or incorrect repeatable process and then replicate that across hundreds of different clients. So I've not got any horror stories, but I don't know if you've got anything, Mikey.
Yeah, the dumbest DevOps thing I ever did. I can tell that story real quick. But yeah, so test your automations, make sure they're working properly before you send them to production systems. You know, double down on that statement. But during the pandemic, I had a friend who did a live stream, and they wanted to live stream it. They had already been uploading the video to like Facebook and YouTube after the fact, but during the pandemic, they could not hold their event, which occurred once a week. They wanted to live stream it to multiple platforms at once. There's obviously software on the web that already does this, but their budget was really tight, and they asked me for help. I saw that there's a really nice Nginx module that can do this live streaming for you to multiple platforms, and I built out a Ansible script that could automate it, and all he had to do was run a command on his command line. He could launch a new server with the right stream keys for that particular week, and the live stream would go off. So I was like, well, this is really cool. I'm pretty impressed with this, so I decided to put it on GitHub. So I remove all of the stream keys that they had for testing, and then uploaded it to GitHub. And then within seconds, I started getting emails like, your droplet is complete. I have a DigitalOcean hosting account. It's like, your droplet is ready. Your droplet is ready. I was like, what is going on? And I log into my DigitalOcean account. I had included the private key for my DigitalOcean account in the GitHub commit. So it was public on the internet. I mean, obviously no person saw it, but there are bots combing GitHub for anything that looks like a key. And then once they figured out it's probably identifiable as a DigitalOcean key, and they probably launched like 40 or 50 droplets in like 20 seconds. So I had to like quickly erase that key and like just start deleting droplets. I mean, like it did cost me like a couple of dollars because there were so many, but be careful with your sensitive information. That's the point of this story, is be very careful, even if it's just something for fun that you're doing. There are still sensitive details that can leak out in various ways. Don't do what I did.
Awesome. So there's a couple questions that are pretty similar here, so I'm going to try to group them here. But a couple people obviously joined this webinar to learn a little bit more about how to automate some of their practices. So a couple of these questions are basically, where do you start, right? So what's sort of like next steps from this webinar? Where can you start? What's sort of like the easiest bare minimum? This is what you need as an MSP to sort of get going with this automation practice.
I have some thoughts on that. What about you, Chris? You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. Yeah.
So some of the things that I like to hear that MSPs are automating first are monitoring and alerting. This is very crucial for things that are coming up. If you have proper monitoring and alerting associated with it, you can be proactive in things that are happening, like perhaps a piece of hardware is failing in some way. You can proactively reach out to your client, get it replaced before it actually becomes an issue where hard drives fail or whatever. And then there's also the alerting aspect, where the alerts are great, but there is perhaps a need for information to be aggregated into another system. So everything is producing a bunch of logs, a bunch of alerts, and you need one place to look at that, like a SIM, something like that. So monitoring and alerting with an aggregation piece, I think, is a really important thing to kind of make sure is working in the early days. I think a lot of people skip it because SIMs and stuff like that are kind of expensive and kind of hard to comprehend. But I would encourage you to make that a part of your early days stack. And then kind of like a public service announcement, billing automation is key, because you have to get paid. Cash is king. It's the most important thing to keep your doors open. So billing, monitoring, and alerting.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is just agreeing with that really is that most MSPs, or a significant amount, have got RMM tools that can allow them to do a portion of this, but I guess some probably just put them in and just use them really as glorified remote control tools and things, whereas they there's so much more that all of the RMMs can do if you drill in to learn. And again, this is the great thing. One of the things I love about the MSP community is I'm sure that whichever RMM you use have probably got a community of script libraries that you can use and leverage, and repositories of scripts that other people have put together. And it may not exactly fit your use case, but have a look at it, tweak it, experiment with it, and to get it to do what you want to do. And reach out to the community. I think there's so many great groups on LinkedIn and Facebook and things. People are only too willing to help out other MSPs. So if you've got the RMM but you aren't automating, then speak to your peers and ask them what they're doing and see if you can do the same.
Yeah, there's so much more data that they're producing, so take advantage of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Mikey's horror story touched some people. We got a question about.
Has anyone uploaded a private API key to GitHub before?
I don't know if anyone's admit that other than you, but so we've got a question on here around what do you suggest people don't do for automation? Like, I guess their question is around what's like a biggest mistake an MSP can make when it comes to automation?
I'll jump into that, because I don't know whether it's the right answer or not, but I would say the biggest mistake is not doing it in terms of, and maybe doing it the wrong way. I think that, to go back to the point we made at the start about trying to automate these tasks, I think the biggest mistake is not including everyone and bringing them along with the journey. So if you just kind of create these scripts and say, go and spend half a day on the service desk and say we're going to automate all of this and mandating the way it's going to work, I think that would be a mistake. I think it's important to bring people with you. I think it's important to have a mindset. And I think, as Mikey said at the beginning, if they're doing it more than once, let's see if we can automate it. And maybe, I don't know how you do it, but almost try and get them enthused to do that. And maybe, I don't know whether you have contests or you have sessions where the team gets down and says, what can we automate? But just try and make it a collaborative thing, just to try and say, I keep doing this, is this possible to automate? Some people probably say, well, those systems are too disparate. Then someone may say, like, this is Zapier or something, or whatever we can do to make that work. So I personally would say that the first big mistake is not to think about automation. But I would say that following on from that, it's important to bring the whole team along with you and to try. And I'm sure that you'll learn or get so many great ideas from other members of the team that probably you've not thought of, because you're not doing that role day in, day out. So that's kind of what I would class as a kind of a mistake.
Yeah, not doing it, 100%.
So if someone wants to add to that, is there something that you should never automate, never in all caps?
I haven't run across anything yet that I shouldn't automate.
No, I can't really think of anything. I guess there may be things around data, and but even then, if it's scripted correctly and it's planned and it's managed and it does the right thing. I mean, for example, you could have an automation which says if you've got a client that leaves after 120 days, delete the data or something that you held on their account. I mean, it's doesn't you don't want to delete the data incorrectly, but if the script is correct and works functional, there's no reason why you shouldn't automate it. And lots of organizations do work like that, but I can't think of anything that I would say never automate. But by the same token, I wouldn't say automate anything without testing it. Even though it could seem trivial, it could break something else. So I think you have to be very careful with all of the automation that you do.
Yeah, and for those who out there are not yet automating things or are right now thinking of things in their mind that like they could automate, like it seems like really complicated to do this stuff, but it's actually not that complicated. If you think about it like a bunch of if statements, like if this happens, do this thing. If that happens while that thing is happening, do this other thing. And you just build this system up to do the work for you. But it's not as hard as you think, and just get started. It's really the key point.
Awesome. Yeah. And Chris, when you were going through talking about bringing people in, when you're about to automate, make sure everyone's aware of what's happening. Someone asked, how do you convince someone who's anti-automation to get on board with it?
Yeah, I suppose maybe this person that's anti-automation is, maybe they don't exist. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like one of the first points I raised to Mikey is, what if people think it's a threat to their jobs? But do they really? I don't know. But I think that the key to it is to explain the big picture, why you're doing it. You're doing it so you can do more, you can get more clients in, ultimately that makes your MSP more successful, which gives them more job security in the long run, and hopefully lets them spend the time doing more exciting stuff than restarting print spoolers or deleting temporary files or whatever it is they're doing. So again, I do think it kind of comes back down to the thing of making it inclusive, and that should hopefully explain the why to them. And I think if people explain the why, then you can generally get the buy-in, and hopefully you can sort of convince people that if they're not sort of pro automation, you can kind of tell them why you're doing it.
Yeah, and show them the power of automating. Like, install DNSFilter on these 300 machines. Like, okay, let's see, you go, and then I'll go, and I'll spend 30 minutes, or for DNSFilter, like 2 minutes in your RMM, and then I'll do it, and then you do it, and let's see who's faster.
Well, that's a great point. I think that was a pretty good one to stop at. So I know we're almost at time. So is there any parting thoughts that you have before we start to sign off on this? Either Mike or Chris.
I would just say, go for it. But again, I can't stress the community enough. I love working in the MSP community. I know that at JumpCloud we've got huge amounts of scripts or command libraries that can be deployed. I know that I used to be a partner of Datto, and Datto RMM have got the com store. There's a huge amount of stuff in there that you can use. So if you've got an application that you think, how do I check that Google Chrome's updated on all of my users' machines? Don't go and reinvent the wheel. Trust me, for every RMM, there'll be something out there which does this. Just go out and look for it. And if you open it up and you don't understand the logic, and a lot of them have got all the comments and things in, reach out to the author. Trust me, the people I know that know about automation, they love to talk about automation. So, get in touch with them, ask them, leverage the community, go into the user groups, join just get into these Facebook and LinkedIn groups, and just have fun with it. And I think you'll soon find that it can be transformative for your MSP at a at a high level. But I also think that from a kind of job satisfaction level, it can be important. It can be really cool for the employees as well.
Yeah, I concur. Automation can just bring so much more productivity to your business. Give your team the tools that they need to work on these automations, have them work together so that they together create the system that is going to bring your business into the future. And that's really, my most important point to get out on this particular webinar, and I appreciate everybody for coming.
Yeah, and I think, just a final thought, I think it's probably easier than it was 10 years ago when I was doing it, because if you think people now, everyone's got Alexa devices or Echo devices with routines, or Google devices, and people are always trying to think of routines at home to do, like, Alexa, I better not say this, otherwise it could go to a blackout, but turn the lights off, or bedtime or something, and they create routines to turn lights off, music, all this kind of stuff. So people are kind of in the mindset of doing it at home. It's just trying to think, how can we take that sort of creative automation mindset and put it into a work environment?
Absolutely. Bunch of if statements.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And with that, just want to say thank you again to not only our panel here, Mikey and Chris, for their insights, but thank you everyone for joining. Great conversation, great questions. Feel free to keep the questions going and the conversation going. Reach out to either JumpCloud DNSFilter with anything that you thought of, have any questions with. We'll be happy to get you in contact with the right people. Like I said, there's a very short survey at the end. Just let us know what we can do to improve, how you like this webinar, and then what we can do differently for the next time. But until then, just want to say a last thank you, and hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday and rest of your week. Thank you.